If a player cleans his ball during play of a hole, except on the putting green, he shall incur a penalty of 1 stroke. That's a rule, Jerry.
But it's just a friendly game. Why do you always have to be such a stickler?
Because that's the way I was raised.
Welcome to Spirit of the Game, brought to you by the Colorado Golf Association. Here are your hosts, Ed Mate and Lewis Harry.
All right, we're back for the first podcast, the first Spirit of the Game for 2024. And I'm delighted to have back for a encore performance, Robert Duke. Robert.
Good to be here.
Well, yeah.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's we're actually recording this, full disclosure, in 23, but this will air in 24. So the ball will have dropped, no pun intended, from knee height, and we'll be off and running in 2024. But no, it's great to have you. To remind those of you who are not regulars to the Spirit of the Game, Robert was our tournament director, rules and competitions director for 4 or 5 years, and has the last couple of years. How many years has it been now? 3?
It's been 3 come like May of 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to be entering your
3 seasons. 4th season.
This will be your 4th season as a rules official for the LPGA Tour. So yeah. Looks like
and second for the LPGA. Did 2 years with the Symetra / Epson Tour, and then started full LPGA.
And speaking of Symetra / Epson, one of our very own, Robin Choi, was the low qualifier at Q School this year. That was pretty fun to see. So,
yeah, she did great. Had a couple other, I think Becca Huffer.
She made it through.
Made it through, yeah, and she had a really good year on Epson. And Robin Choi came in big, so she's going to have some status next year on LPGA, so I'll be seeing her out there.
All right, so we're going to talk rules. That's the theme of Spirit of the Game. And you remember what I am, right? There's the spirit of the gamer and the letter of the law. And I'm what am I?
Spirit of the game.
And what are you?
Spirit of the game.
What are you?
I am letter of the law.
You're letter of the law? Well, I think Lewis Harry, who's my co-host, who's on vacation this week, it takes your letter of the law to a whole new level. He is a letter. If you're letter of the law, he's like, I don't know, what's smaller than a letter. And he's got all the rules, numbers memorized.
Punctuation of the law.
That's right. So you've left things in good stead there with Lewis. You do remind me of him, and he reminds me of you. So I way too often call him Robert, but I am getting better. So I want to start with the rollback. The announcement about the rollback that the USJ issued and the RNA issued was really glossed over by the next week or maybe days after John Rahm news that pretty much buried it.
Right.
And what I thought was really interesting was there was, not surprisingly, really, very little made of any reaction from the LPGA Tour. And I just went out on Google to see if there was anything publicly stated. Again, just to refresh everyone's memory, the initial plan was a model local rule to carve out only those highly skilled players, and making this rollback rule only apply to those players. Theoretically, the LPGA would not have been included. Now they are, along with the rest of us. So pausing there for a minute, what is your setting up golf courses for the LPGA Tour? What is your quote unquote take of just anything you'd like to share about the rollback in general and the LPGA in particular?
Yeah. I think distance-wise, it wasn't an issue for us. I didn't think it, and I don't think anybody thinks, and our players or fans or anybody who, watches that, that there was a distance issue, if you want to use that word, issue with women's professional golf, because most of the time, all the time almost, we're not going all the way back on these golf courses we're playing. There's one golf course that I could think of, and I was trying to think of it before this. It's Wilshire Country Club out in Los Angeles, 100-plus-year-old golf course, and we play it all the way back there pretty much. And 9 under one after 4 rounds, which is, so the course still holds up really well, and it plays at around 6,400 yards, which is kind of our standard 63, 64, 6,500 yards. And we're not, and we're playing those on a 7,000-yard golf course maybe. So a lot of times, we're using the second, third, sometimes fourth box from the rear. So if distance, was an issue for us, we would just continue to move back because we have space. Obviously, with this, decision, it's not targeted at the LPGA or women's golf. It's, you know, for the entirety of golf. When we're wrapped up in that, we're in the spread pattern, if you will. We're just bystanders of that. We're going to be wrapped up in it because we play golf using these golf balls that are going to be just rolled back across the board. So whether we like it or not, or whether we want it or not, it's going to happen. And our players will get used to it and they'll adjust to it, and it'll be a wholesale equipment change for everyone. So be on the same page. At the same sea level. If it goes up, it goes up. It goes down, it goes down. It's the same tide, for everyone. If that makes sense. They're all going to get used to it at the same time.
Has there been any discussion about this that you've heard among your coworkers or just in the player locker room, so to speak, water cooler conversations around it, or has it been kind of a non-issue?
Not really. I mean, the news came out like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We've kind of shut down our last big event was the CME championship, and that's 60 players, limited field in that way, our top 60 players, and that was in late November. And then I went to Q Series, and not much talking about there with that, but yeah, we really haven't just been around each other at tournaments since this came out. I know it leaked or whatever a little early, and people were giving their opinions and takes on it, and as a group we never really talked about it. But I don't think anyone's ever thought, wow, they're really hitting it too far. And when we think about our setup, we're trying to take into account the big hitters, where our average is going to be, and then our on the smaller side as well. So that's how we're thinking of distance, and in that regard, it's all relative, I guess. We're trying to set the course up as best we can for everyone. And so if the ball goes a little shorter and we need to borrow distance, we can always just move up a tee box and tee it forward, right? Like that's what the USGA put in, whatever, like 10 years
and
ago.
I don't know what the average club head speed is on the LPGA Tour, compared to the PGA Tour. The new threshold is 125 miles per hour, and that's effectively what is driving the new distance standard. So it's a math equation. You just take 5 miles per hour swing head speed and you add it, and you still have an overall distance standard. So the testing threshold is now more in line with the swing speeds of the longest hitters in the game. So again, it's really not even going to touch the women's game. So again, personally, I can afford to have my opinions out there maybe a little bit more than you can, because you work for an organization that, I mean, all due respect, I mean, nobody listens to me. That's my point. People actually listen to you. I thought it was fascinating to see how the whole thing played out and how it started out as a monolocal rule, which I think was smart. And, we could talk for hours about the hypocrisy of this, and organizations that were against, were pro bifurcation, meaning allow some players to use a bank anchored club as a, for instance, that now seem to be against it. But I thought, just in terms of addressing the issue, why you're catching a lot of dolphin in this tuna net that have no reason to be in that net. I mean, it's not. Again, I know I do understand that it sort of preserves this idea of we all play the same game, which is not true at all. And I put Thomas Pagel on the spot on one of our podcasts earlier this year, and basically said, this notion that the USGA has always held on to with such fervor, that there's only one game, there's only one book. And I'm like, come on, when you make 20 exceptions or 30 exceptions or 100 exceptions with model local rules, how can you still make the case that there is one game? And Robert, I'm mixing you with Thomas. Thomas said, he doesn't really cling to the term bifurcation the way he once did. And now it's just more like options. There are options. It's one game, but you can turn certain options on or off. So anyway,
Yeah, it's like a menu. You have
yeah,
a la
yeah,
carte items and like, well, I'll take these drop zones and yeah, I'll take the
yeah,
temporary movable obstruction. We'll do that
yeah.
and um, yeah,
Well,
to your go ahead.
no, I was just going to say the other thing is we've already done this. I mean, there already is a mechanism for this called the one ball rule. And we didn't make a big deal about
Mm,
that. The one ball rule was introduced for skilled players, wasn't for
yeah,
everybody. And
yeah,
so it's just amazing. And again, if I had to sum it up in, I guess, 4 words, much ado, that's a word about nothing. Because it's
yeah. That's
what,
one word. Yep.
2028 that this goes into effect at the professional level. And I don't even know if the LPGA will adopt it in 2028. Um, you probably don't know the answer to that. And then for the rest of us, 2030. So it's so far off
Right.
that, and it's gonna, I don't know. And I guess I heard that like 20% or more of the balls that are already out there are conforming.
Yeah. I
So
think it was 30. I was
yeah,
reading the insights earlier today, just to reread it again, and it was 30%. It sounds like from their article already conform in their current state, and which balls those are, and which how much they're used. I don't know which
right.
ones they are, but they didn't really say.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot, and you can either move off the spot or you can take it. One of the joys of talking to you is you're a very thoughtful person. You have opinions. No fun to have people on that don't have opinions. And maybe now that you work for the LPGA, your opinions have been washed away. What do you think
Mm.
of this? What is Robert Duke? If you were the USGA, would you be doing this? Or do you
Uh,
think that you just leave it alone?
I think I would do it, and I'm not upset they're doing it. And if it were me at the controls, I think I would flip the switch, so to speak, as far as rolling the ball back. And you look at what they do, right? The USGA. Again, we were talking about LPGA, which is a very small subsection of the golfing world. I mean, any professional golf is such a small fragment of it. You take a step back and you look at globally this game and that they're in charge of with governance, because that's what they do. We play by the rules and the RNA right, certainly have a little input, and there's things we talk about that are unique problems to the LPGA and the PGA Tour that maybe other golf courses or other organizations don't have. So there is input that way. But for them, as far as governance, yeah, I think rolling it back, or maybe a better term, putting on the brakes of where the ball is going, because it's all relative, right? Players will adjust, they'll figure it out. Yeah, the ball won't go as far, and it's gonna. It sounds like it's happening. So I'm not necessarily for or anti, because whatever I think, I guess I am for it. I mean, in that way, globally, right? For everyone, the LPGA is a part of the golf ecosystem, so we're gonna, you know, if it rolls back for everyone, but our concern necessarily isn't the concern of the health of
Right.
what I might do when I play golf, but it's part of the overall health of the game. And if it's going to make the overall health of the game better, which I'm hoping it does, and I'm trusting the USGA that they're using their judgment that it does help the overall health of the game, then that's what I want. I want the
Mhm.
game to be in a good place and down the road, even though I'm not in charge of it in that way, right? I'm just running competitions for LPGA
Right.
Tour.
Right.
I'm still a golfer and I love golf, and our players are going to get caught in it too. And whatever, maybe that number goes higher or lower. I don't know. Does the rollback, that we didn't roll it back far enough? I don't know. I mean, is they putting the brakes on? I think if it helps the game, I'm for it. And our players will adjust. The distance. You know, um, it's been increasing, and the players that want to increase, I think, can keep going that way.
Well, when you
But yeah,
talked,
I think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not a bad thing.
When you talk to the USGA, they say you'll get really two reactions in general. One is you didn't go far enough. You should have done a lot this sooner,
Mm,
faster, a lot more. And
yeah.
I'd probably fall in that camp. Um, and then those who are very much against it. Just in looking at that article that I Googled, and it came up to Brittany Lincecum, who I guess was known as one of the longest hitters
Mm-hmm.
on the tour. I don't know if she still is. And her reaction was very much the kind of absolute kind of, I'll call it a shoot from the hip, uninformed position. She had read Keegan Bradley's comments. Keegan Bradley was just making these extreme statements about how he'd lost 40 yards and, it's never going to be the same. And like the worst decision ever. Just very, very, not very measured. And
Mm-hmm.
then Lydia Ko was much more measured. And I think that really, like anything, you have certain people that are thoughtful and certain people are not. And again, anybody who thinks the USGA is doing this just because they want to be a disruptor, and they feel like
Right.
a need to puff out their chest and say, "Look at us," they really are ill-informed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying the USGA is a perfect organization. And again, in this country, we tend to put this on the USGA will it really is the RNA and the USGA who govern the game.
Right. Right.
And this was arrived at after incredible study. I thought, I referred to the study as the no blank Sherlock report because I would have done it in about a week. They did it in
Yeah.
over 7 years.
First day on
And
the job.
if there's ever
Yeah.
been an organization that approached something with care and thought and research, oh my goodness. So to
Mm-hmm.
to sort of stockpile, dogpile on them and say this was just a silly, and I think that was the word that Brittany used, silliness. I mean, come on, you just haven't even taken a minute to even take your head out of the sand.
Well, and I think it's hard to know what's going to happen, right? I mean, we've thought about this, I think, for a while because there's always been echoes and rumors of, well, they're going to roll the ball back or pull back the driver or whatever. So I'll be interested to see what happens with it because nobody really knows. I mean, other than the ball's not going to go as far.
Right, right.
So I think I read in that article with USGA, Mike Wan said something along the lines of doing nothing is not an option.
Mhm.
And doing what the USGA says in their motto or whatever it is, for the good of the game. I believe them when they say that and that they've put thought into it and research into it certainly because they have that kind of capability to you've seen their testing center, the amount of
Mhm. Well, now
equipment,
it's in
tools they have
well,
to
now it's in
measure
Pinehurst.
this
They
stuff.
moved.
And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with it.
Well,
But
and the other thing that, we're not in a vacuum here. I mean, the biggest story in golf for the last several years,
well,
these
right.
two or three, has been um, the Live versus PGA Tour war. And it really does shine the light on, do I really care about professional golf? I mean, this topic of rollback, you know, and I follow the professional game very closely. LPGA, PGA, DP World Tour, the Let. If there's golf on, I'm watching. I'm a
Hmm.
I'm a I'm a nut when it comes to wanting to watch golf. Is my interest level higher or lower depending on if it's the best players? Obviously, yes. I mean, I'm going to watch the majors, but a lot of avid golfers don't pay any attention to the professional tours. They just go out and play golf and they have fun. They're not fans of watching golf on TV. Lewis Harry is
Or
one
it's
of
not
them.
appointment viewing, right? They're not going
No,
to
yeah,
stop what they're doing on a Sunday, with a
right,
few exceptions maybe,
right,
and say, hey, I'm gonna watch this golf tournament. They might
right. So,
DVR it or see what catch up later, but I don't know how much of it is appointment viewing.
well, probably
I
less
think the people
so
that do
than,
care a
yeah,
lot, right? I
right,
mean,
right. But the point is, in this context, who cares with the professional game? The average player who's not necessarily glued to the TV, are they even aware of this? First of all, they may like what, and they're not going to notice it. And when you say health of the game, you know, um, it's healthy today and it'll be healthy tomorrow. And whether
mm,
with or without a rollback or, I don't know. I think that we tend to make things bigger than they necessarily are. So the
yeah, I
last
don't.
comment that I've heard on as far as health of the game, and I thought it was a good point on one of the many podcasts I listened to. If the game was really struggling, they would say, we can't possibly do this when the game is struggling. If the game was sort of on on a plateau. They'd say, we can't do this while the game is flat. But since the game is
Mm,
growing, oh, we can't do
yeah,
it now. So that's just a sort of an empty argument.
yeah.
But I don't know. I just, like I said, much ado about nothing as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and I think that's something you had mentioned too. I don't think anyone's going to not play golf because their ball doesn't go 5 to 7% farther,
Right.
right? And because you talked about it, I think with the anchor ban, someone who anchored their whole life. Now, professionals, okay, they really, theoretically, someone go out and play with it anchored right now at their local course, like because they don't, right? They're just playing golf, like whether they anchor it or not, maybe it doesn't matter to them. But for the professionals, they have to relearn maybe how to putt. But I don't think anyone is going to give up the game of golf the because of the well, like you said, the anchor ban. People said, okay, I can't do that now in official competitions. I got to do this way, and they still play golf. No one's going to give up golf who's played golf or not get into golf because the ball went 5% or 7% or 9%,
Right.
whatever it ends up being, um, less than what it would have been the previous year. And for someone who picks up the game of golf in 5 years and 10 years, they're never going to know the difference, right?
Right.
They're going to, oh, like I used to hear about, balata balls. I've never hit a balata ball. I don't know what that even means to hit a balata ball. So that had no impact on me. And I think maybe that's the long term thinking of the health of the game is in 5 years, like people that just get into the game, it won't matter for them. Right. And that's what they're doing it for that long tail out.
Right. Right.
Um, and I think, again, from our professional side, if they think it's going to be a hindrance to their game, and they work hard at trying to gain distance and use that to their advantage. We talk to players about that with course setup stuff, and some players that's where they make their money. Right, is the par fives, is getting home in two, or setting themselves up in a better position on a long par four. Maybe they're the ones who it really matters to. So that's just a really zoomed in viewpoint, which is what I'm on here today for, is to talk about specifically the LPGA tour. So in that small sphere of the golf world, which to me is a big sphere of the golf world because that's where I work,
Mhm.
it's really important. And they're going to, anything that they deem detrimental to their game, I think they're going to have an issue with. So I totally get that, because a lot of the minor details that you and I might say, it doesn't matter, to them, that could be the difference between making a cut, missing a cut, a top 10, winning a
Yeah,
tournament.
it's fair.
So for them, all those little things are blown up. And I get, um, some of the frustration with Brittany. I get her frustration with that,
Mhm.
and saying, "Well, I hit the ball farther now. I feel a little less advantaged." Well, okay, I understand that, but like I said earlier, it's going to happen because it's not just a local rule anymore. It's the golf ball. It's like this piece of equipment you have to use to even play the game is going to be rolled back a little bit. So everyone's on the same plane with that
Right.
part
So
of it. It's an
so
equipment change for everybody.
yeah.
So
So let's move.
that's just an adjustment.
Yeah, let's move to the next topic,
Hmm.
in honoring our 40-minute rule. The 40 seconds to hit a shot and 40 minutes to record a podcast. So so third season out on the LPGA tour. Curious to know any notable rulings that have came up or for you specifically, or
Hmm.
that might be of interest to folks that listen.
Yeah, most of the rulings we get are pretty benign. You see some stuff. It's funny that you think will never happen, and then it just finds a way, on the LPGA tour, or at a high level for some reason. The where a ball gets into a tree at. You're like, how could this ever have happened? And there it is in this. Like we had one this year in a hollowed out tree. I think it was in Arkansas, and I have no idea how the ball got up in there, but they found it, and they were like, "Here's our ball. What do we do?" We took an unplayable. So it's weird. It kind of goes both ways. There's a lot of average stuff where you have a day and 5 rulings, and they were all about a cart path or whatever. Which, okay, fine, that's pretty easy. And then there's some where it's like that. It's, say, an easy ruling, but it's like the unplayable ball. It's just like, but I've never seen something like that before. One that happened this year, and it didn't happen to me. I was there. I was in Cincinnati, but I heard about. I was on the radio, but talking about hitting the ball far. We had a par four that players were driving, and it was tipped out, and it was downwind, and it was like the 10th hole, I want to say, at Cincinnati, and player was on the green, she was putting, and the group behind, I guess, thought they had moved out of the way because we were doing a wave up, and maybe there was a miscommunication there. But anyway, so she's putting. Group on the tee thinks they're clear to go. She drives it on the green. The ball's rolling up. This player has no idea. She putts. As your ball's rolling to the hole, the ball played from the tee hits her ball as it was being put.
Oh my God.
And yeah, came over the radio.
What are the odds of that?
Right. Like
Yeah.
and that's one of those things when I read the rules sometimes, and just the way I read them and kind of break them down or study, if you want to say it like that, is, I try to think of a situation that I've had happen and then tweak it like 1 degree more and be like, okay, now what would happen in this situation? And while that doesn't seem uncommon, like, okay, you could have a situation where a player's putting and a player off the green is chipping and didn't notice, or in a bunker,
Right,
the
right.
blast that, and that seems somewhat common. Like people are playing ready golf, they didn't see each other, their balls hit, that's fine, and it doesn't change the ruling at all, obviously. But from playing it off the tee, I've never, how
Well,
often do
just
you have a drivable par
think
four that way?
about how much space golf balls occupy.
Oh,
And the
right,
idea
yeah,
that a ball that was started out 300 yards away ends
right,
up occupying the exact same space as another ball,
yeah,
both in motion. So
at the exact same time,
they're
right,
only in that location for a split second, and they
yeah,
happen to hit in that
yeah,
location. I mean, I always say that everybody has lottery odds. We just very rarely use those odds to win millions. We usually use them to get really bad stuff happen to us. So there's
yeah.
one.
Or a player in this case, and it wasn't a bad break for anybody. I mean,
Right. Well, what's the
you
ruling, by the
know,
way? Let our listeners know, how do you rule in that situation?
yeah. So the player who hit the ball, well, sorry, the player who drove the ball from the tee, um, and you can look at it as a stroke made off the putting green. That ball is going to be played as it lies, which after the deflection, and you're right. Like, what are the odds if either player takes half a second more to
Hmm.
take a deep breath, or whatever, or just the whole
A wind
flux of the
direction,
day, the
the old
wind,
butterfly
exactly.
effect, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the butterfly effect. So any one of those things changes, and it doesn't matter. And it's a situation we would forget about in 10 minutes, where a ball rolled by another ball, and we wouldn't even have got called for it. The player would have looked around and been like, "Why is she hitting into me?"
Right.
And it
Right.
wasn't intentional; it was totally on
Yeah.
accident. But anyway, so the ball
So
played
the
from the tee,
flavor
that
of
hits the
lies.
ball. That ball is played as it lies. So wherever that comes up after deflecting another ball, played from the putting green, that's in play. You're playing it. The ball that was putt, because it was played from the green and it hit this ball in motion, that is going to be a must cancel and replay. So she's going to not even have the option. She has to cancel and
Right.
replay that
Right.
stroke. So hit a good putt, hit a bad putt, doesn't matter. She's no penalty, of course, picking her ball up and putting it back on the spot and playing
You
from there.
mentioned before we went live here, started recording, a
Mhm.
change in the 2023 rules, and that definitely came up. And that's balls that
Yeah,
have been dropped or placed and then subsequently move after they come to
yeah,
rest. So maybe
yeah,
you can explain the change in the rule and where it, what, um, where, how you dealt with it.
yeah. And that was, I think people just kind of offhand called that the Ricky Fowler rule, because I think that popped up first in a major way at the Waste Management, I think, where he
Yeah, the
his
year he
ball into a
won.
penalty
Yeah.
area. Yeah, okay. So he was definitely on TV. His ball into a penalty area, and everything is mown real fine there. It's real tight, so there's not a lot of friction for the golf ball to grab onto, especially on if there's a you know hill rolling into a pond. So it hits in the penalty area, drop, place, gets it to come to rest, and goes up there. He's reading his putt, and he's like on the green. The ball, for no, whatever, gravity, whatever, the grass shifted, rolls into the penalty area. He gets penalized for that. You know, I think a lot of people didn't feel that was right. And okay, he didn't really do anything to cause his ball, and he's being penalized for that. He didn't act upon it. He didn't play a poor stroke. Maybe he took a poor drop and dropped it on too much of a pitch. I mean, you wouldn't say that either, but he didn't do anything to cause it to move, and he gets penalized for it. So that was updated. That wasn't the only situation or only time that had happened, but that was the biggest one. And that moniker, I guess, got tagged on to the rule. But um, the way the rule would work now is, if after taking relief, whether placing, dropping, replacing a ball, once it's come to rest and it moves and it goes to another area of the course, you'd be required to replace the ball on the spot. If it just moves and come to rest an inch away and it just didn't change areas of the course, then you're playing your ball. It's that changing areas of the course or going out of bounds. Even if a ball were to roll out of bounds, same
Yeah, I
concept. You
thought
would be
I thought
penalized for
that was
stroking this.
a very smart way of dealing with it. Because I would have
Hmm.
another way of dealing with it would have been anytime a ball moves, even if it doesn't move to a different part of the course after it's been dropped
Hmm.
or placed, you would replace it. That's more like the
Yeah.
putting green rule, right? Where you kind of you establish it
Yeah.
as a fixed point when you put a mark and lift it. The
Hmm.
same would sort of carry over in the general area that, or other parts of the course, I should say, where a ball has been returned to play. So
Hmm.
it wasn't a stroke that got it there; it was a hand, either a place or a drop.
Right.
And I think that was a very smart way to limit this and kind of contain it because it's not unusual, or it's obviously a lot less unusual for a ball to move a little bit after it's remained at rest than it is for it to roll all the way into a penalty area or all the way off the golf course. And I
Right.
think it was a very good change. The other thing that
Yeah.
came up, interestingly enough, Ricky Fowler handled it beautifully. He didn't
Mm.
bemoan. He just played on. And it certainly was a bad break. The next year, Charlie Hoffman, or maybe 2 years later,
Yeah.
the
That's
same
right.
thing
Yeah.
happened where he placed it on a tuft of grass and it was precarious and it rolled into a penalty area. Same exact situation. And he went
Hmm.
ballistic and sent out a tweet and named everybody. And so there's nobody out here to protect the players while he finishes, T30 or T60.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, but did you have situations come up where this kind of there was an unintended consequence, or did it play out kind of the way you think the rule was intended to
I
be?
think it played out beautifully with regard to
Yeah.
why the rule was introduced in the first place, or why maybe let's say it was updated in the first place, or added on rather to the rule it's
Hmm.
in now in 9.3. I think it worked just as intended, and I don't know. If you think about the future and you talk about how the putting green has evolved with rules, and it used to be, or let's say now, like you said, once you mark it and lift it, you own that spot. No matter what happens, if it moves in it or whatever, you're back on that spot, and that doesn't pertain to anywhere else, any other four areas of the course, or other three areas of the course where that would conceivably happen.
Hmm.
It's just if your ball rolls over and in the fairway and you haven't touched it, then you're playing it. You don't own that spot because theoretically you've not picked it up yet, right? You hopefully haven't picked it up. But to your point, if you had and you had to replace it or take a drop and then it rolled in the fairway, you would play it as it lies if the ball was already hit there. And that's kind of how I walk it through if a player's asking about that. And where it's come up this year, where I think it's worked. There was an event toward the end of the year at Pelican, and really great golf course, really good shape, and it's all the fairway edges are mown like right into the water. It's all really firm and fine. So and it's all pretty pitched too. So there's situations where ball's definitely not going to come to rest, or if it does, and I would have a lot of players. And after I had these rulings, I'd start almost leading with it to say, hey, once your ball's in play here because you've hit into a penalty or you've taken a drop and place, or
Hmm.
drop, place. If your ball moves and goes back in, you're not going to be repenalized, right? So that's something I think a lot of them are worried about because they got the ball to come to rest, but they know if it starts moving at all, there's a chance it goes in the penalty area, and they're worried about, hey, is this going to repenalize me? And it's nice to be able to say, hey, no,
Yeah,
your
relax.
ball's in
Take your
play here.
time.
You've
Yeah.
you've paid your one penalty stroke. Now you're good. So I think it's worked as intended in that way. And I'm trying to think of another time where it hurt the player, but
Well, I don't know why it
they're
would.
always going to be
Yeah.
benefited. It's a very player friendly rule
Yeah.
for a good reason. I think everyone, whether you're a golfer or not, or I mean, whatever, you see that Ricky Fowler situation and say, "Oh, he's penalized your stroke," and you'd say that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So I think this
So I have
is
a couple of
feels
things
right.
here that I'm curious to know. Last month, Lewis and I did a thing that we called dissecting the drop. And we took a little look back using some resources on the history of the drop. And we speculated on the future. And you think
Mm,
about it, how it started out as a throw, then over your shoulder, then arm's length, shoulder height, and then knee
Yeah.
height, where we are today. If you were again the decider of these things, would you vote to eliminate the drop and go right to a place? Do you, and again, knowing the benefits, the argument for it is it's going to simplify greatly, and all those what ifs and scenarios that come up by letting the ball fall through the air go away.
Hmm.
At least theoretically, you're going to reduce them. So it's going to be simpler. The downside is now you're not allowing fate to play a hand in where a ball is played when you're returning a ball
Right.
back into play. Where would you land on that from the LPGA? I'm not saying you're speaking for the LPGA, but where would you
Right.
land?
I still think I don't love getting it to where they're just. I say anyone's just placing it after. Let's say you hit into a penalty or you're taking it unplayable. I think there still isn't like you shouldn't be able to just pick your exact lie, right? Because lies are supposed to be random. Even when you're dropping it from knee height, they don't feel as random because you're really getting able to pick it. If you hit a ball 250 yards in the air, you know, you're definitely not getting to pick your line. If you're hovering over it knee height, there's a little more control, but there's still always that concept of you once the ball is out of your hand, gravity and a natural force is acting on it. And if it hits and rolls a weird way, that's part of it. I still don't think you should be able to pick your lie as definite as placing it right on that spot. I think you can say, I want to drop it in here. And that's something, we'll hear a lot from players talking to her caddy and she says, oh, what do you think? And he's like, I think, I think you should drop it over there. She says, I want to go over here. He goes, well, I think this will be a better spot. So try to drop it right here. So is an element of choosing the area of your lie, but you don't get to choose the lie itself where the ball is
Yeah,
contacting the
so
ground,
it's
which
it's
I
really
like preserving that.
yeah, and I think that's where Lewis definitely is. I made the case when given the opportunity to serve on the rules committee to saying, let's just cut to the chase. This is where we're headed. Let's just get there sooner. Um, I don't know. I think it would be hard to go back. Once you went to place, it'd be hard to reverse course. Some would say,
Certainly. Yeah,
that's what the
definitely.
rollback is. But again, the other idiosyncrasy of this, because if you think about it, what did we really gain by going from shoulder height to knee height? Now, before you answer that, think about what we added. We also added that the ball has to remain in the relief area. So you used to have a
Hmm.
situation where you dropped from shoulder
Hmm.
height, but the ball did not have to remain in the relief area. It was given an extra 2 club lengths.
Hmm.
So it was much more random. It was much more similar. So those two go together.
Yeah.
So theoretically, the knee height is going to reduce the distance the ball travels once it. But now this is a classic example of unintended consequence, because now a smart player has the ability to be very calculating in where they drop it.
Hmm.
And if they drop it at the extreme edge of the relief area, even from knee height, they know pretty darn well it's going to roll out. And now they know it's going to do it a second time, and now they can place it. So there's
Hmm.
no doubt that we introduced with the knee height drop and the must stay in the relief area, the
Hmm.
ability to manipulate more. So the ball is getting placed much more than it used to.
Yeah.
So other than that, what did we accomplish from knee height? And maybe we should go back to it has to stay in it doesn't have to stay in the relief area, but keep
Hmm.
it at knee height. So the chances of it staying in the relief area. So I honestly think that those two things were being discussed concurrently. And again, I was inside the rope, so to speak, of the discussion. And the
Yeah.
original plan was an inch off the ground. And before that, it was a release. So the
Right.
staying in the relief area was not necessarily paired. It was paired with something really akin to a place. And they ended up with a foot
Yeah.
or a knee height. And now you end up with kind of, I don't know. I know that we're probably losing people in this, but I do find this to be a really interesting little wrinkle that came out of 2020, 2019.
Well, I remember. It's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking about that when you were talking about earlier the progression. I remember it sounded like from talking to you and reading some of the stuff that was like before the rules came out, it was from behind your back to shoulder height. Then it was almost to a situation where the ball had to be touching neither the ground nor your hand at some given time, or you just had to like let it go. And then, okay, that opens a lot of doors of if there's a drop in the rough. Well, did she place it because the ball didn't fall? And is the ground, or is the grass the ground, or whatever?
Yeah, yeah,
So it seems like they not overcorrected, but backed it up a rung and went back to the knee, which is a stable point, right? And I still
yeah,
think when you drop the ball, once you let it go, there's that potential energy. And yeah, there's a lot less than from your shoulder where, you drop it and it could go a long way. To your point, if it rolled less than 2 club lengths from that
right.
spot and went out of the relief area, we're still good. Um, I think it was more for the knee. I think it's still needed. I think we still want to have that again, the ball acting on the surface of the ground, and it could go either way. To your point about it could get out of the relief area. Um, that definitely happens. And I don't see as many players trying to do that on purpose. I think it just happens. For the most part, from my perspective, players taking relief from a situation, they're just trying to get out of the situation they were in. I don't think they're thinking about it as much of, oh, I want to get to place this. Because, if it's in the fairway, let's say, or they're
Yeah,
taking back on the line, and whether they're placing it or dropping it in the fairway doesn't really matter. It's going to be the same line no matter what. The point you'd want is if there is a lot of questionable terrain they're having to drop into, but because of the drop, there's still a little bit of randomness acting on it. Yeah, I don't really have an answer for if a player wants to drop it on the edge and
yeah.
drop it in
Well, and
place,
you're right,
then
because
they can
most,
do that. That's just part of it. And if
yeah.
they want to do that, then
Well, most of the
there's
time
nothing we
it's
can really
not
do about that.
it's really a non-issue because as you said, they're
Right.
driving, it's in a fairway. And again, I could be the cynic in me would say, well, if it's the PJ Tour, they play lift, clean, and place anyway, most of the time. So what difference does it make? So another subject as we kind of come down the final couple holes here.
Hmm.
And I knew the time would fly by because you and I love uh,
Yeah.
to go deep on anything. So as you've matured as a rules official, what do you think you've improved at the most in terms of dealing with players from where you were when you were out
Hmm.
there for the first time on the Symetra Tour to where you are now? What's different about your bedside manner?
That is a good question. To me, the first thing that comes to mind is, and having you say what you just said about time flies. Obviously, and people that know me, I talk a lot. You talk a lot. So together,
Hmm.
that's winning combination when it comes to rules. There's a long conversation that feels like 5 minutes, but really it was 30. Um, I think I've gotten a little bit more succinct when I first started than when I first started. Winning a ruling, you get to the point a lot quicker. Not that I was slow, I think, at first. I just think, I don't know, the more you do it so many times, you can kind of anticipate what's going to happen and where it's going to go. Not to say that you lead or are led, but I think I'm a little bit quicker doing it without obviously compromising any correctness or anything that we need to talk about before the ruling is over. Because those minutes matter, those seconds matter about having a 1 minute ruling versus a 3 minute ruling. That's a big deal, and usually we're getting radioed in. So it's not like I'm on top of it already. I'm on hole 5. There's a ruling on hole 3. Takes me a minute to get there, and they've already radioed. So that chain of that connection time from when they actually need the ruling to when I get there is still sometimes over a minute anyway. So
Mhm.
time is precious, and there's TV time we're thinking about, and just keeping players and keeping groups in position. And again, the most important thing isn't being correct. But when I first started, you know, on Epson, candidly, I didn't rules officiate all that much working for the CGA. It was a lot of admin work. It was a lot of, event planning, starting and then scoring. And I would talk about rules on the radio, but very rarely would I just go out and have a zone like, oh, I'm going to rules officiate on holes 1, 2, and 3. I just didn't do that. We have a lot of volunteers that are great at that and do that. And I would do course setup and stuff like that and starting, but I never really like rules officiated truly. Uh, Obviously, there's a book knowledge that comes with it, and that transfers over to the field. But the actual bedside manner, I hadn't had a ton of experience with it. You pick it up pretty quickly. I mean, it's not that hard, but I hadn't really done it a ton at CGA. So that early on, I was like, huh, the job is, hey, during the tournament, you're going to either set up, and then afterwards, if you didn't set up, your zone's 1-2-3 or 1-2-18 or whatever. Didn't do that a lot. So cutting that time down of, the bedside manner with players, because they're not asking for a rule seminar. That's the thing is, I see some people do that, not anybody on our team necessarily, but at the CGA level, some of our volunteers, they think it's rules seminar time, and it's not. It's like, they just tell me what to do here, man. Like, don't tell me
Yeah.
why the rule functions this way, or they're asking for the time, and you're telling them how to go to watch.
So let me make a statement and tell me if this resonates or applies to you. That as rules officials become more experienced, they become more player friendly as a general rule. Would you agree with that? Disagree with that? The other idiosyncrasy that you deal with is you get to know these players. They
Sure.
become familiar to you, and you're not gonna. It's not a one and done. So how much does that
Right.
influence? So really respond to the first part, which is, you feel like you are more friendly. And when I say friendly, what I mean is, are you more likely to give relief now than when you first started?
No, no, I think that stays pretty neutral, and probably not the opposite necessarily, but it becomes like nothing really changed. It just becomes the baseline, right? Yeah, like you said, you get to know players, caddies, you know them, you see them when you're traveling, you see them on the course, whatever. You do get friendly, and you just know people and say hi, you know what they're doing, and oh, how's your brother doing? How's your son doing? You know people, you know their names. So you talk to them that way. But with regard to giving a ruling, the ruling is the ruling. It doesn't matter who or what it's with or who it's for, giving relief or not giving relief. It just comes down to what the situation is, and it's not about me, right? I'm,
Right.
you know, a vessel for the rules to say the rules don't allow this, or yes, I know this is a strange situation, but we've talked about this as a rules team, during our survey, and prior to the tournament as a group, and we all know this is not gone under repair. And any other player who hits it in there, we've already talked about it. And you're the third player today who's it in here in this area, whatever it may be. It's not gone under repair, and we've talked about it. So it doesn't matter who or what it's for or what it's with. It's just the ruling is the ruling, and you don't really take any, I don't say ownership of it, or like, oh, I know this person, so it's different. It's like, this is what the rules say, and
Right.
I'm here to help you with it.
Well,
And if you need to take relief, then we can go that route. But otherwise, this is what the rule is, and
yeah.
that's the rule.
So a little more context around this particular topic. I mean, and I would say that as I have grown and evolved as a rules official, and as you pointed out, haven't done it on a regular basis, but have worked enough tournaments. And you and I, as you said, are similar. I definitely have given less rules seminars and more rulings. Get in,
Mm-hmm.
get out, in a friendly way. But I would say that it's been my observation that those who do it professionally, you, Pete, the other, you know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
professional level rules officials, are generally more friendly. They don't go into a rules situation with an already, kind of a confront. I think that's inexperience when you see, because when you think about referees in sports, they're usually being, attacked. We don't treat
Mm-hmm.
It's always amazed me that what is, we teach decorum and etiquette, and yet when you get into an arena, it's okay to yell profanities at the poor people that are there trying to make sure the game is played. It's just sort of a disconnect for me. Why is it that it's okay that the moment in a hockey game they start singing Three Blind Mice when the referees and lines guys get on the
Yeah.
lines? So anyway, I think that's sort of just a natural thing that people assume they're going to be attacked and that they have to be kind of a cop, as opposed to, no, I'm here to help. I'm here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the way I like what you said there, a vessel. It's not a personal thing. I'm just applying the rules.
Right.
And I'm sure at other sports, you see that same tendency. Some are better at delivering bad news than others.
And that's just, I think, and that's a good point. I mean, that's just, a demeanor I try to be mindful of, is just to be friendly, and I'll say be in a good mood. But just be neutral about it. I'm talking to this player about a ruling. To your point, and this doesn't happen that much, where if someone's short with you or in a bad mood, they're working right now. This is not just a round of golf. This is impacting them, as
Mhm.
they play. So if they're in a bad mood, I don't take it personally because it's not necessarily directed at me. And sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, it's not directed at anybody in particular. I'm just maybe in a bad mood because I'm in a bad mood or whatever. So I go the same route, and maybe they have a reason to be in a bad mood. They're not playing very well, and I'm giving them more bad news. But you don't even look at it with that tent. Even I guess bad news is even not the right term because it's neither good nor bad. It's what it is, and
Right.
they might take it as bad, they might take it as good, but that doesn't really matter. It's like here's the situation, these are the facts, this is the answer, and if you need any help, we can go there. But I think having a good demeanor about it is part of it, and you just go in neutral and
Right.
don't take anything home with you from that
One of
round.
one of the more memorable pieces of advice I got was from Andy McPhee, who I think is now retired. He was a rules official on the European Tour, now the DP World Tour. Very, very seasoned, experienced official. And we are just chatting over lunch. I've told this story many times, maybe told it to you. And he said, I was just saying, kind of picking his brain on what this topic, how do I get
Hmm.
better at being a rules official, bedside manner? And he says, don't be afraid to, and I'm using my own words here, to give the
Hmm.
player a preview of coming attractions. It's okay to walk a player through a ruling from A to Z and not
Hmm.
give advice. And he
Sure.
said that he sees a lot of rules officials so reluctant to kind of sort of hypothesize on what might be coming. And they're in the process of doing that. You're
Hmm.
giving the player, you're leading the witness. And that really resonated with me because, and he gave me an example, a ball's in a TIO, and it's going to say it's a really complicated one. And he knows where the ball's going to end up. And he
Hmm.
doesn't hesitate to tell the player that we're going to end up over here.
Hmm.
But as opposed to, because sometimes in that, and connecting those dots, if the player drops slightly differently than what you anticipate, they may not end up there. And then you've put yourself out. And wait a minute, you said we're going to end up there. And now I'm not
Right.
ending up there. So it's a delicate thing. But I really and you have to be careful because you can't theoretically tell a player, well, if I were you, I would drop in this
Right.
area as opposed to at this extent of the relief area, because then your ball is most likely going to be entitled to secondary relief from a new situation. So
Hmm.
um, anyway, I just think there is a balance there, and I've probably been too far on the other side where I was like, no, I'm just going to let it happen. And then
Hmm.
if I don't know if any of that resonates with you or you've seen that kind of unfold.
Um, yeah, I get what he's saying. You just kind of lay the options down and say, here's what we've got here. And players, I mean, they're pretty smart about it. They know because especially ones that are veterans, they've maybe had a similar situation or seen a similar situation. And like all golfers, and especially then they remember things, right? A lot of players, oh, I was playing yesterday, I had, you know, 150 in, hit 7 iron, and I had a little bit of cut spin on it, and so they can tell you like they'll remember rulings from the past where
Mhm.
say, well, I saw she did this and this, or I had this happen and this happened, and they'll ask not leading question, but they'll start asking questions, and you just say, yes or no, yes, this will get you here, and if you did this will get you there. But they're asking, so a lot of times they're driving the conversation that way because they know, okay, well, there's temporary water there, or whatever it is, and then there's
Yeah.
GUR over there, and so they're kind of, but they're also doing it because they're wanting guidance on if this is obviously correct. Like, no player wants to cheat. Nobody wants to take a bad drop. They want to play within the rules, but they also want to explore what the rules are going to give them and where it's going to take them before they do it. And that's something I always preface with say, well, before you pick your ball up, and not to lead anybody, but it's like you might be playing it here. I don't want you to pick it up, and then now
Hmm.
we have a whole other situation because we're dealing with whatever the situation is right here. So
Hmm.
before we, and I always kind of lead before you don't play it as it lies, right? Because you can. Here's your option is this or this, and I give them if they have multiple options. For a TIO, for instance, we use either side relief option where they can go either side. So I'll say you can play it here, or you can take it over here, or you can take it over there in hereabouts, and we'll measure when we get there. But I'll give them their options, and then they're smart enough. They know the angles in their game and where they want to where they want the ball to go. I'm just there telling them yes or no, we can't go that way, or why not? Well, because of this, or whatever it may be. Um,
Well,
so I'm
listen,
yeah, I'm,
let me leave you with this question, big, broad. Are you having fun? Are you happy you left this? I mean, we miss you. Uh, although Lewis has certainly filled your shoes and better than in some ways, and will never replace Robert, that's for sure. Your
thank you.
spirit and your unique perspective is truly yours, just like anybody. But how are
Mm,
you? Is this job what you thought it was going to be? Is it something that you're really enjoying? What do
yeah.
you think?
Yeah, for the most part, it is what I thought it would be. I mean, there's all these little things you never know till you start working, but it's what I thought it was going to be. I do enjoy it. For the LPGA, especially the travel is something that's a lot more broad than I was ever doing. We're globally we go to a lot of places, which is good for the game and good for our game. I think we have a lot of places we take the tour and where the tour takes us that are places I'd never seen before, and we're going to places that this is the only professional golf they might get, and it's at the highest level. So that's very cool. We'll have good crowds and Thailand or China, because they're golf crazy over there in some parts. So
Have you been able
that
to
said,
have you been able to take advantage of those trips at all outside of or is it pretty much head down, go to the golf course or have you been able to extend a trip knowing that you're interested in
mhm,
a lot of things,
sure,
philosophy and uh, so I'm just curious if you've been
yeah.
able to enjoy any of them.
I Like I said, this was my first year this year, so I didn't do as much as a add on where, and you can do that, and some of our people do, where they say, "Oh, I'm going to New York, and I'm gonna tack on an extra few days on the tail end because I don't have another tournament to go to." I didn't
Mhm.
do that as much. Or hey, I'm in France, right? We're at the Evian. I'm gonna stay for a couple days before I fly back. I didn't do that much last year. I'm just trying to feel it out and kind of the rhythm of it. I might do that a little bit more this year, but I probably won't stay and add an extra week in China.
Mhm.
It's kind of hard to get around. For me, I just obviously I don't know the language. Not that I couldn't get around it, but I just haven't done that yet. But you can. I mean, it's not something you can't do. Obviously, if your tournament ends and you have another tournament to go to, you're traveling to get to their tournament. But if you have a tournament and it ends and you're just going back home, you can certainly stick around for a few days during the tournaments. It depends on what it is, and your involvement. If you're the advanced official, might be a little less time to go do stuff. But sometimes, if you're in a good area with a lot going on, you get home and you can go out and go see the culture. And was able to do that in China last year a little bit. Had 2 or 3 nights where we went out with some of the other crew who did speak the language, and we went out to these really nice dinners, and they could talk to the servers and do things we couldn't do, even though that sounds simple. In order to you say, oh, you guys won't like this, but you'll like this, and
Mhm.
so that was cool getting to experience it that way. But back to your original question, am enjoying it a lot. We're getting, um, you know, getting to travel, which is cool. And sometimes you don't get to go do stuff outside of work, right? You're at the golf course, and it's a big week. It's a busy week. That comes first. And if you do get to go do stuff, that's extra stuff. But I'm enjoying the whole process of it. The time off is different, right? Because we'll have chunks of time where we're not actively working on something. We're going back home. Like I think when I first started the job, I played golf in July, and I was like, I haven't played golf in July, like on like a Tuesday, in 5, 6, 7 years, because I'm always doing some marking the next golf course and going to the next
Yeah.
tournament. So that ebb and flow is nice. We're still working during that time. It's just not that 9 to 5. Hey, we're in an office, or hey, I have this stuff to do. You have stuff to do, and it might be in the morning or afternoon, or all day or whatever. But you can kind of choose when you're going to work during those off times. So that was an adjustment. But overall, I've loved it. It's cool to do something, and I tell this to a lot of people that ask. I always wanted to do it, to officiate at the highest level, so to actually get to do it and be around like the best players in the world is really cool. Pretty rewarding. I mean, I just enjoyed it. That's really all I can say about it. It's just I've loved it. You learn things as you go, and that was different. It's a totally different type of job than what I was doing at CGA. So to relearn something like that, and how the LPGA does stuff, and setting up these big tournaments, was a good challenge for me, and I've enjoyed doing that, and still getting better, hopefully, at it. And it's been cool. So to finally get to do that has been fun. Like,
Well, that's great.
I
Well, we
feel like
miss
I've
you,
done a lot to
and
get up to that.
we'll just remember us when you're, a really big wig, when you're the next commissioner or whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
thanks for joining, and I'm sure we'll have you back again for Robert's Rules 3.0. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Great to
Look forward to
see
it.
you.